Actually, I don't know how to work this.
Hello everyone, Jay Warden here, and welcome to my recap and review of the episode Broken Pieces, where Rios falls off the rails, Picard continues to earn Soji's trust, and Seven reappears to reclaim the cube from the Romulans. Remember, there will be many spoilers ahead for this and other Trek series, otherwise, enjoy. You know the routine: flashback, 14 years, exposition. We see O, Rizzo, Ramda, and a bunch of other Romulan ladies touch a glowing table which gives them apocalyptic visions that make the vast majority go crazy and kill themselves, except Ramda, who's just pulling her hair out, and Rizzo, who just seems mildly upset. O then says they can now begin their work of eliminating all AI by starting on Mars. Present day again, while Rizzo has a chat with her comatose auntie Ramda, her troops have located Elnor and proceed to subdue him despite a valiant effort on his part to fight back, but thankfully for him is rescued just in the nick of time by 7 of 9, who somehow got on board without anyone noticing. Meanwhile on the La Serena, Rios is totally freaked out by Soji, seemingly recognising her from his past, and tells Picard that he'll take him to the nearest starbase, but after that he's checking out. Picard reassures Soji that he still intends to get her home, but Raffi is rather unhappy with Picard just bringing aboard anyone he likes without really knowing them, and pulls a phaser on Soji, as they now know that Jurati had a tracking device in her and that she murdered Bruce Maddox, so really Soji just could be the next person to betray them as far as she's concerned. Raffi then has the EMH explain that Jurati didn't try to kill herself, but injected herself with a compound that would stop the tracking device, and also explains what she did to Maddox. Raffi continues to rub it in Picard's face that they know nothing about Soji and really shouldn't trust her before storming off. Picard isn't one to be stopped by a few suspicions though, and calls up Admiral F-Bomb, and rubs her face in the fact that he was right all along, and demands a squadron of Federation ships meet them at DS-12 so they can get some help in defending Soji's homeworld from a Tal Shiar assault. Admiral F-Bomb F-bombs him, but says she'll send the ships as requested, finally getting some much needed help from Starfleet that he should have had all those episodes ago. Raffi meanwhile tries to chat with Rios about the situation, only to find she's talking to the navigation hologram. Apparently after setting a course for DS-12, Rios activated all his emergency holograms so he could mope about in his quarters, but doesn't know why. He does however identify Soji as someone called Jana, but would much rather be asked about astronavigation instead. So Raffi obliges and asks him about a drawing she observed on the cube. Apparently it depicts what seems to be an octenary star system, 8 stars all in a perfect series of orbits with each other. Though there are some ancient apocryphal accounts in Romulan texts of such a system, he can find no evidence such a system otherwise exists. We then meet another new emergency hologram, an engineering one that someone decided should sound like Scotty. He too seems to recognise Soji somehow, but like the ENH doesn't seem to know why, but he does at least explain that an octenary star system occurring naturally would be pretty much impossible, suggesting that such a system would have to be artificially created. She later tries a meeting of all 5 holograms to get to the bottom of what's going on with Rios, but it seems that the answer is just out of reach, with them only able to give some tidbits of information, including that Rios apparently suffered a mental breakdown at some point after meeting Jana, and his former captain blew his own brains out. In his quarters, Rios is drinking away his woes while looking at old memorabilia of his days on his old ship, looking remorsefully at a photo of a younger self with his old captain. Raffi comes in and manages to prod him enough with what she's learned for him to reveal the true story of his past. Apparently they picked up 2 passengers on an unknown ship, one of which was a girl called Jana who looked exactly like Soji. After a few hours though, his captain received a directive from Commodore O to immediately kill them both or face the destruction of his ship with all hands on board before turning the gun on himself and pulling the trigger right in front of Rios. The whole event was hushed up by Starfleet, and a few months later Rios had a mental breakdown and was forced to leave Starfleet as a result. As all of this is going on, Picard chats with the now conscious Jurati, who explains what Commodore O did to her and how she pretty much wants to kill herself every day now as a result of what she was shown, but at least accepts responsibilities for her actions. She later gets to geek out massively while meeting Soji and asking her all sorts of questions. But Soji questions whether, despite how cool she finds her, if she thinks she's a real person or just a machine, and though she doesn't seem to get a direct answer, Jurati assures her that despite Commodore O wanting Soji dead, she would never try to harm Soji after having met her. So the crew all finally get together and Jurati explains what she saw in her vision, that some 200,000 years ago an ancient civilization created some AI that went bad, and as a result something else came along and wiped them all out. They posit the idea that once a particular threshold is reached with regards to AI, it spells doom and destruction for all involved, and this is the deadly secret that the Shat-Vash keep that drives them mad and explains why they are on a singular mission to keep AI from developing to that threshold. It's also why they're now on their way to wipe out Soji's homeworld, which they found only because of Soji, who gets a bit upset. Knowing they have to reach her home before the Romulans do, she takes control of the La Serena, throws up a force field, and lays in a course for a Borg transwarp conduit that should give them a nice little shortcut. Rios quickly manages to break through her force field, a little annoyed she's driving his ship without permission, but Picard suggests for once they let Soji take control and try it her way. In response to the choice given to her, she politely asks Rios to take her home, if not for her then for Jana's sake, so Rios agrees. Meanwhile over on the cube, as Rizzo finds the bodies of her men, Seven and Elnor arrive at the Queen cell and Seven begins to fully reactivate the cube, regenerating all the damage it previously sustained. She takes a look at all the Borg currently on the ship, thinking she can use the many thousands of Borg still in stasis against the Romulans by reconnecting them locally to each other in a sort of micro-collective that she would control, though she fears she may not want to release that control once the Romulans are all dealt with. Rizzo though immediately realises the danger they're in and instructs her minions to kill off all the remaining Borg held in stasis by jettisoning them into space while she takes care of the XBs herself. As she starts motoring away, Seven realises what's happening and quickly plugs herself into the Matrix and begins the wake up process for all the other Borg. But sadly she's too late as they're all jettisoned into space in countless numbers. Rizzo gets mobbed by a group of XBs and is almost killed before sadly doing an emergency beam out to a waiting armada of Romulan ships, which then starts warping off to assault Soji's homeworld. With the cube now secure from the Romulans, Seven disconnects herself, cryptically saying that Annika still has work to do. Eventually the last Serena arrives at the transwarp conduit, and after a lovely optimistic speech from Picard to Rios about not giving in to fear and doing things differently, Soji takes him into the conduit, but not without a quick reveal that Narek seems to have tracked them down again, and in turn follows them into the conduit. I have to say that so far, the second half of the season is a definite improvement over the first half, though I really wish it would stop using flashbacks at the start of an episode as a form of storytelling. I find it a repetitive and rather clunky method of exposition instead of interweaving all this information more dynamically or fluidly into the story as it progresses through our characters. A once in a while flashback is fine, just not every episode. Finally though, we do get a lot of answers to many of the questions we've had as this series progressed. We now know specifically what the Zhat Vash are fearful of, and why they tend to go mad, why Jurati went along with it, why Rios left Starfleet, and a connection he has to a Soji-like android, and a confirmation, unsurprisingly, that the Romulans, or specifically the Zhat Vash, are responsible for the Mars incident. Perhaps some relief to me is that we are not necessarily dealing with a doomsday scenario here, simply one that has happened in the past once AI reached a certain threshold, and that Soji is not the destroyer herself, rather someone who may herald the arrival of something far worse who will destroy them. The implication here that another very powerful race came along and wiped everyone out, sort of like the Reapers over in Mass Effect. If you're not familiar with Mass Effect, the Reapers are a super advanced race that wake up every 50,000 years or so and wipe out all spacefaring civilizations, ostensibly to prevent them from wiping themselves out when they develop their own AI, which almost inevitably rebels against them. The idea that an ancient race actually moved stars into an intricate octenary system that would not otherwise occur naturally is actually quite cool, and though the episode doesn't name the species that did this, there is one ancient civilization that's been mentioned before that specifically did have the power to move stars, that being the Takon Empire in the TNG episode The Last Outpost, most famous for disastrously introducing the Ferengi to the franchise. However, the Takon disappeared 600,000 years ago, and this race is mentioned to have existed 200,000 years ago, so I doubt it's the Takon. But there is at least precedent for an alien civilization having the power to move stars. In any case, the threat is implied but not certain, and Picard presents the current dilemma in a much more suitable Star Trek style of hope and optimism, in that we don't need to take the same path and submit to fear, instead being more open and accepting. I'm still not entirely certain why all this information would drive a person mad enough to kill themselves though. It's a pretty dark tale, sure, but it doesn't really make sense to me that it's dark enough that you'd want to bash yourself in the face with a rock or shoot yourself in the head. Why are only a handful of people not affected in this way like Rizzo and O? Is there something in one's personality or constitution that makes them go mad, or is it just arbitrary? This madness is also apparently what caused the cube to fail in the first place, as once they assimilated this knowledge, even the collective couldn't handle it, which I just find dumb to be honest. I could buy that an individual might go mad over this, but I just can't buy that the collective itself would go mad over this. Speaking of the cube, though wonderful to see Seven again, with Jeri Ryan once again knocking it out of the park with her performance, her sudden timely arrival is a bit too convenient, with no mention of how she got on board without being noticed, just like Elnor when he first got on board, making the Romulans look pretty shite with their security measures. I mean, they do have what looks like a massive minefield of defense satellites surrounding the cube, several ships, and lots of troops on board. Do they not screen incoming arrivals at all, or have some sort of shield or transporter suppression field up? In any case, it seems she plugs herself in and seems to become some sort of temporary Borg queen, but unfortunately fails to save most of the Borg on board as they get ejected into space. Except that First Contact clearly established that the Borg can survive in a vacuum, so why not just beam them all back on board? She does at least successfully regenerate the ship and kick out all the Romulans. With her in control of the cube, Picard no longer rendezvousing with the Federation task force, a Romulan fleet on the way to Soji's homeworld, my suspicion is that Seven will use the cube to transwarp itself to Soji's homeworld and make a last minute save by engaging and probably decimating the Romulan fleet. Barring some other third-party intervention, like this unknown aggressor mentioned earlier, I just don't see how else right now that the Romulan fleet can be defeated, and I'm sure we need to tick off the big action set-piece checkbox before the season wraps up. However, if this unknown aggressor does show up, it could be everyone joins forces to try and fight this new threat, which will lead us into Season 2. There is some speculation that Picard and Discovery will tie in somehow together, given that Season 3 is set hundreds of years in the future where the Federation has apparently collapsed at some point. To my dismay though, Rizzo did not get killed as was teased, but I guess since we're treating her as the big evil villain, she needs to do more evil things first. However, they did attempt at least to humanise her a little by having her talk to Ramda, who turns out to be her auntie. Yet another coincidence in an episode that has quite a few of them. But let's turn our attention now to the events on the La Sirena. Rios here finally gets his backstory fully explained, with us learning how close he was to his former captain, pretty much a father figure to him, and how he's essentially met a copy of Soji before, in this instance called Jana, along with another flesh and blood android simply called Beautiful Flower. Of all the people that Picard hired out to take him on his mission, this guy has a direct personal connection to the events surrounding this plot that once again makes it all far too convenient for my liking. Bordering almost on lazy writing, I'd say. That said, though I don't care too much for mopey self-pitying Rios, Santiago Cabrera is again fantastic here with his multi-role performance of essentially 6 versions of Rios as Raffi has a meeting with his 5 holograms before the real man himself. The writing might be a little suspect, but the acting is great, and that helps elevate the material for me at least. We even get a hint of an actual Federation ship design here, something sorely lacking in this series as we see an outline of the ship he served on. I'm really hoping we get to see some Starfleet ships before the season clocks out here. I'd personally like to see a mixture of old and new designs pop up. Raffi meanwhile manages to show off her smarts again, putting enough dots together to get to the root of Rios' problems, thanks to the aforementioned hologram meeting, and she also figures out the deal with this octenary star system. Last episode shows us her somehow noticing this drawing amidst the chaos while the ship was held in a tractor beam, which she later brings up with the holograms. She has name-dropped a conspiracy before called the Conclave of 8, which she thought were a bunch of people, not stars, but unless you were really paying attention, most people will probably have missed that or forgotten about it already, and this feels more like an afterthought to me, as if they didn't have time to develop this idea a bit more. There was however a nice little callback to a couple of episodes ago as Raffi brings Rios a cup of coffee, much like he did for her when she was also in a bad drunken place. It's a nice little touch. Raffi overall, as I said last episode, is much better to watch when she's on her game, investigating, putting clues together, supporting the other crew members, instead of wallowing in her own misery or crying about a family we don't really care about and still has not turned up since. Last week I thought that Jurati had tried to kill herself, and though I did question the method she chose, we do find out that she only did what she did to kill off the tracker she swallowed from Commodore O. As I've already said, I don't understand why this vision of doom makes people want to kill themselves. Jurati is obviously struggling with it, but at least she accepts full responsibility for her actions, willing to turn herself in for the murder of Maddox, and redeems herself more when she nerds out at finally meeting and talking with Soji. She sidesteps Soji's question about her being a real person, but I think her answer is essentially yes when she says she'll never attempt to harm Soji now she's gotten the chance to have a good chat with her. Speaking of O, we do finally get a largely acceptable answer here regarding her background. It turns out she's half Romulan and half Vulcan, which explains why she can mind meld but also can't deal with bright sunshine as a normal Vulcan could. At least she didn't turn out to be a mirror universe agent. I really would have hated that. Soji meanwhile continues to improve as a character as she tries to figure out who she is, what she likes, essentially learning everything all over again. She has a nice quiet scene with Picard talking about this, asking how he hoped Data would have remembered him had Picard died and not Data. I don't think I quite buy that Data loved Picard any more than Picard loved Data, as I sometimes feel Picard's deep connection to Data is a bit overstated in this series. Soji also proves her ability to easily bypass security systems as well as gain knowledge, as she easily takes control of the La Serena and takes the ship to a transwarp conduit in order to get back to her homeworld more quickly, though not before being presumably followed by Narek, who somehow managed to find them again and catch up with no explanation. The use of a transwarp conduit furthers my theory that the cube will somehow be involved in a final battle over Soji's homeworld against the Romulans, given this is Borg technology. By the end of the episode, she seems to have finally earned everyone's trust to some degree, and it's telling that she's learning to trust the crew herself after what she's been through. Finally, as for Picard himself, Stewart is still doing a great job here. His disappointment with Jurati is palpable, his sense of hope and optimism when telling Rios they have a choice to do things differently and not give in to fear, a clear parallel to today's socio-political events, is great, and the exact sort of message I'd expect from Picard. I also liked him continuing to gain Soji's trust and allowing her to take control and make her own choices, seemingly taking up Riker's advice last episode about how he normally makes all the decisions and now that won't work out this time. I did however cringe once again at Admiral Clancy telling him to shut the fuck up, but at the same time I did enjoy him rubbing it in her face a little about how he was right all along. So with 2 episodes left, apparently a 2-parter, though that kind of thing means less in a serialized show like this, I will probably combine my review for the last 2 episodes together, so let's see what happens to wrap this show up in the episodes Et in Arcadia Ego Parts 1 and 2. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did then please do check out my other reviews as well, and also if you haven't yet then please do like, subscribe and share. Until next time, this is Jay Warden, signing off.